Well, good evening, and thank you for coming. I think this is a particularly auspicious moment to be holding this, and I say that for one particular reason, which is that when I came back from holiday and started writing stories again on Somalia this week, the very first one I had to write was that 1,000 boats had set off from northern Somalia across the Red Sea to Yemen on a journey which will take so many people either to exile or death. For some of them it will be both. Some of them will end up in this country where tens of thousands of Somalis already live, and who are a vibrant and powerful community, but who risk so much in order to get here. I'm sure that many of you know a great deal more than I do about Somalia. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on it. I'm sure that some of you will know very little about Somalia. So just to sort of fill it in for a moment, whoops, our map has disappeared, which is a pity. I thought I'd give a very brief overview because Professor Lewis, who's a great expert on Somalia, is unfortunately unable to be with us because he's not well. If we can just sort of very briefly go through it, as it said in the introduction, since 1991 there has been no effective government in Somalia, but after the overthrow of President Siad Barre, you then get a long period of really terrible suffering by the Somali people, with warlordism and clan rivalry tearing the place apart. In 2006, there emerges a Union of Islamic Courts which brings some kind of order to the country, and they are in charge and begin to really get something going until late in 2006, the Ethiopians, who have been the traditional enemies of the Somali people, certainly that's, I think, the way that some of the Somalis would see it, intervened and overthrew the Union of Islamic Courts, drove them out. The United States intervened as well, attacked some of the Islamists who'd sought sanctuary in the south. They said that they were members of Al-Qaeda or had links to Al-Qaeda and were a threat to the United States' interests in the region. And since then there has really been an ongoing war with the tiny African Union force based in Mogadishu, and a couple of towns which are under the government's control, really only sections of Mogadishu and Baidoa, which is the seat of government. And the African Union forces really provided nothing in effect. In June this year, the government managed to sign a ceasefire pact with the Opposition Alliance for the Re-Liberation of Somalia, which was the way in which the Union of Islamic Courts transfigured themselves. They were based in Eritrea, which of course has its own concerns with Ethiopia, and has been frankly using Somalia as a way of getting at their enemies in Ethiopia. Those talks have been ongoing. Some people in the Union of Islamic Courts have opposed the talks. Some of them have gone along with the talks. There's a big division in that. And I hope that we'll be able to explore some of these issues. In a sense, one can look at the situation geographically. If you look up at the top corner, you'll see Eritrea, which is where the really hardline elements in the Islamic courts are based, still to this day. You then get northern Somalia, which is now describes itself as Somaliland and sees itself as an independent state. As far as Somaliland is concerned, that's what they'd like to see, but unfortunately for them, the rest of the world does not accept them. A bit further down in the northeast, you get Puntland, which is nominally part of Somalia and pays lip service to being part of Somalia. But although the president comes from the region, they don't do much to help. To my view, are not very much involved with the rest of the country. The south and the centre of the country is where the great conflict is going on, and where most of the real hardship in terms of the current drought which I'm sure Tom Quinn from MSF will be telling us about, has been going on. And you have the government either locked up in Mogadishu or in Baidoa. That, in a very rough and ready way, and I'm sure there are many mistakes in it, is the current picture. What I thought I would do would be to divide this discussion into two halves. Awali Kulani is a political activist and a member of the New Somali Youth, and he's going to begin by, he's based in London, he's going to begin by outlining where the current talks are now. Juliana Rufus is a reporter with Al Jazeera and a former member of the UN panel, the UN Security Council Monitoring Group, which has been out keeping tabs on the weapons that flow in and out of Somalia. Who buys them, who doesn't buy them, who sells them, where do they come from? And it's been an extraordinarily useful role, and I'm sure she has many fascinating things to tell us about, including about reporting from Somalia, because of course Somalia is now one of the most dangerous places in the world to report from. BBC lost Kate Payton some years ago, tragically shot in Mogadishu, and frankly it still haunts our coverage, I think, in some ways. But people do go in, including the BBC. We'll then have a bit of discussion. After that we'll move on with Tom, who's the head of mission for MSF, and Khadija Ali, who you see up there. Khadija, we can see you on Skype through the miracle of who is a member of civil society and a peace activist based in Mogadishu. I think she's joining us from Dubai. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Excellent, fine. So we'll come to Tom and Khadija after we've had a bit of a discussion. So if I may begin, Awali, would you give us a bit of an outline for where the talks are now in Somalia?
I think the talks are actually the 16th reconciliation or the 18th, however you put it, are on way, and within the Somali, as you mentioned, the groups, the Islamic Union Courts have created an alliance with civil society group members, parliamentary group who are fled from the parliament and who their seats have been filled afterwards, led by Sharif Hassan and Sheikh Sharif, who was appointed as the leader of that alliance. And later on, a few years at the beginning when they were forming, the Mogadishu reconciliation has been happening, which was supported by America and a lot of the international organizations and groups who kind of gave the support to the TFG. But unfortunately, it was unable for them to have a full reconciliation. But to mention that each reconciliation in Somalia, although they failed significantly to bring peace, they have added a bit of change to the structure of the Somali politics. Each one had its own signature to the next one. But starting from 2000 reconciliation in Djibouti, Somalis had a reconciliation that provided not leaders who were united to bring about peace, but some sort of a structure led by Abdul Qasim and Ali Khalif Kaler. Again, we already see as Somalis that the comparison that we make to a state is before the civil war we had a long regime, a military regime, Siad Barre's regime, which was not democratic, which certain roles and positions have been blurred up, and hence that's why you had a problem at the end in 1988, people to rebel against that government. But afterwards, the 2000 reconciliation provided the Somalis with a transitional federal government which was powerless. But people already saw the Abdul Qasim as a president, although he could not go anywhere. Ali Khalif Kaler as a prime minister and members of parliament as ineffective, but existed. And I think it went on. The TFG was formed in the reconciliation in 2004, held in Eldoret, led by IGAD. Again, it was another try to say that we want African problem for African solutions. But unfortunately, IGAD has members which conflict in interest within them, and it will be playing the regional just a group for East Africa. So the reason why I'm coming to that is each reconciliation had its own different signature, but the TFG were powerless when they were formed. The warlords who were ministers of TFG rebelled against the TFG, but with the clan system that existed in Somalia and became powerful after the civil war, they had another contender this time, and that was the Islamist group who were organizing, uniting, and who had, got up and failed many times. They had a little problem in Bosaso, which they've been uh, fought against by Abdullahi Yusuf at the time. It was in 1998, and similarly in Lok and places like that. So the Islamists were growing as the warlords were trying to prepare to fight against or to show their power. And this is where, again, Juliana said it some time ago in her reporting that with the Somali, it's war within war. It's not just two factions fighting. It's sometimes divided into clans. It's sometimes divided into alliances that are formed to take opportunities from the capitalists, to capitalize from the reconciliation itself. But to come to the end point, now it's different. This reconciliation is happening while Somalis have presence of the Ethiopian troops in the ground. The transitional federal government, which started off, had evolved into, after the Mogadishu meeting, after the appointment of Noor Hassan Hussein. Noor Hassan Hussein, the Prime Minister, and Ahmed Abdel played a role to kind of open up the transition to a point of where they have to discuss and sit with the alliance group in Eritrea. And as well as what was happening to the Islamic group at the time was they were getting defragmented in power-wise, and sitting in Eritrea have isolated them politically to some extent. And of course, there is a lot of debate about if that is what led to them coming to the tables of discussion. But the reconciliation is what a lot of people vote for a long time, since the transitional federal government came to power, had at the end happened that Sheikh Sharif, who was a very powerful figure, or the most powerful figure in the Union of Islamic Courts, that carries the success of the 2006 peace that they brought about in the southern region, especially in Mogadishu, has allowed to come to the meeting and sign a peace deal with the transitional federal government last month. Yes, this has caused him some powerful alliance for him to lose a powerful alliance. People like Hassan Darawes, who is considered a very hardcore Islamist, who is a leader that had been with the Islamist group longer than Sheikh Sharif was known, and who is before that a colonel who fought for his country, a patriot as people see it. But that put aside, now we have a situation where the opposition have broken up. The government already had a challenging leadership dispute that have been resolved in Ethiopia with the IGAD umbrella. But a lot of Somalis are hoping that something comes about this peace, as well as that the Ethiopians already hinted that they might go out, and what's going to be next in that. So the reconciliation, and if I kind of dragged on, I do apologize, but it's the Somali situation. Each door opens another one, and without defining it, you'll get lost in it. So you can ask me questions about, and this is my perspective again, it's not everybody's perspective. But with the reconciliation at the moment, this is the last reconciliation which the international community have shown a great importance. And I don't think it's just to bring peace to Somalia, but Somalia not to be a threat. This is how sometimes Somalia is viewed. A threat, a problem, rather than people who need a solution. And I think at the end it's part of all these groups with different interests working together to bring about peace and to have an institution that evolves in a better way. And I'm one of those people who believe that we Somalis need a process of institution, not leaders to be or personalities, but an institution and a process to kind of help us out of where we are at the moment. So the reconciliation have been signed, and we're hoping that they progress into going to Saudi Arabia to finalize it. There are rumors that a few other groups from the Asmara group members might join in as a part of the deal, reconciliation. But I think at the moment, as we speak today, I think the reconciliation is not the big picture with the Somali discussion. It's the withdrawal of Ethiopians and how it happens. And this will unite. I think the Asmara group already stated that if that happens, they will give leadership to their friends or colleagues who have signed the reconciliation themselves. So this might be a unity for the Islamic groups who already signed with the TFG. This might mean the TFG are challenged to, after the Ethiopian troops, to seek out the consent of the people, which we've been following how the tone they had to get against the people, with the people now. And I think with the president's last speech, it kind of showed that now there was much concern that everybody want to keep the process alive, instead of things will tumble out as easily. So I think with Somalis, this is, although we've been in war for 20 years, this is a new territory. This is something that a lot of Somalis cannot say we know how it will end. Previous reconciliations were about few groups who had weapons and who had alliances of some sort in some state. But this time, they're no longer warlords thanks to the Islamists. They took care of, even the last warlord in Kismayo had been pushed away a few days ago by the Islamists. But if the Islamist group do not bring an agenda that, and how they unite themselves is another critical question, and if they can unite as well. So I think we are in challenging times.
Challenging times indeed. Just let me put one point to you. Would it be right to say that, in essence, and to simplify the matters greatly, you therefore have, one can see three groups. You have the transitional federal government, which is allied to the Ethiopians. You then have the Islamist groups with Sheikh Sharif, who've made a reconciliation deal with the transitional government.
Yeah.
And then the third group are in a sense, the hardliners with Sheikh Awais, who are in Eritrea. And those are the three groups who are now attempting to find some way forward.
I think there's another group, the Shabab.
Yes.
A powerful Abu Mansur, and although they do have a respect for Hassan Darwez, but there's no clear direct that they take orders from him directly or otherwise. So again,
these are the fighters on the ground.
These are the fighters on the ground. And Sheikh Sharif, I think it's a challenging situation for him as well, because he signed this deal with the TFG that pulled him away from the Asmara group. So if nothing comes about that might be a risk but Sheikh Sharif controls a big part of Somalia at the moment, so we'll see how it plays out.
Right. Juliana, as you can see, this is not an easy issue to explain, to talk about, but it's also not an easy place to report from. You've done both. Can you give us some idea of the complexities of being a reporter on the ground?
Well, I mean, I do think it's right to say that Somalia is probably the least reported conflict in the world. And I think part of it is, as Awala was trying to explain, the sort of multitude of conflicts wrapped into one. You've got clan conflicts, you've got a national conflict between, to simplify again grossly, but some clans in the south and central region and the northern region. Then you've got the Eritrean and Ethiopian conflict, a proxy war that is being carried out on Somali territory. And then you have the war on terror, which is suddenly integrating the Somali conflict into a global context where you have America and sometimes a European or Western European agenda on the one side, and then you've got the view of some Middle Eastern, but not exclusively, people on the other side. So you have wars within wars, as Awala was saying, and somewhere in there, people are trying to report. And I looked up the Committee for the Protection of Journalists and Reporters Without Borders reports that have recently come out on Somalia, who are saying that after Iraq, it is the most deadly conflict to report in the world, and they gave figures. And given how few journalists these days are going to report and how difficult it is for Somalis to report in Somalia, I was actually wondering whether it might be the most deadly conflict in the world. Because in Iraq, you have the chance to be embedded with troops if you choose, however questionable that is. If you choose to do so, I think the international troops, which are Ugandan, Burundian, in Somalia, nobody wants to be embedded with them because they are just sitting tight at the airport and the seaport, and they're barely able to protect themselves. So I think as a journalistic way of seeking security, that's not the way to go. Then I think, sort of following the stages that Awala was outlining, there's been a decline in security for journalists trying to report from Somalia. Personally, I would say it did become more dangerous with the rise of the Islamic courts, probably starting 2005. You said Kate Payton from the BBC was killed. The last time I was there was probably 2004. I have no intention of going back because a good friend of mine, Martin Adler, who was an incredibly experienced war reporter, was killed in Somalia in 2006 when he was reporting, and he knew full well of the dangers of reporting in a conflict area. But what emerged through, certainly with regards to international journalists, with the killing of Kate and Martin, was a very specific targeting of Western journalists who were coming to Somalia, and a complete end to, if there is such a thing, journalistic neutrality. And I think that also hit the Somali community of journalists very, very hard, because the Somalis no, there are these fairly prominent killings of Somali reporters and executives of radio stations, such as Ali Shamaka from Horn Afrique, the assassination of the CEO of Shabelle Radio, one of the directors of Shabelle Radio, then also the Global Broadcasting Corporation, a very targeted, and that's only Mogadishu. I mean, there are obviously cases of Johar journalists, of cases outside Mogadishu, but the underlying trend is a very clear attempt to silence people, which is attributed to the Islamists, silence people who are seen as traitors, people who are with the NGO, not just journalists, people who are not who are not subscribing to the cause. So I would say that was the sort of first wave of danger to reporting. And then we had the arrival of the Ethiopians, the withdrawal of the ICU from Mogadishu, and then journalists were also coming under pressure from the government side. Al Jazeera was asked to close the office in March 2007 because I had that as a quote. They were not accurate in their reporting, and that was enough for Al Jazeera to close the office. And then there were particularly incidents of shellings and attacks on radio stations, again, Horn Afrique, and a particular incident earlier this year in March where there was a particularly heavy firefight and looting of Bakara market by government soldiers. Radio stations reported on that, Shabelle in particular, and was subsequently raided by government forces and soldiers who confiscated the equipment. So now what you have is journalists quite literally being caught in the crossfire and targeted from both sides. So you've got the most dangerous conflict in the world. You've got it underreported. A lot of the reporting is channeled through Nairobi, which is considered a safer place to be. You've got stringers living very dangerously, feeding news into international news organizations. But I would also say that nonetheless what you have is a wide variety of Somali reporting against all odds. You've got a large variety of websites and sometimes radio really representing each region of the country. Often, I understand, staffed by people who don't receive any money, who do have a degree probably of clan and regional and local interest, which they're furthering through the websites. But nonetheless, that's one of the key ways of getting news out there. And maybe one of the last things that I would certainly say as somebody who's sort of tried to report on Somalia, not just as a journalist, but also trying to gather information for the UN, you've got the Islamic militants who are very clever in furthering their agenda and very quick in putting their agenda out there. So there are websites where jihadi videos are being posted, where Islamists or leaders such as Mukhtar Robo are making statements, and you've got a government that is far less responsive to journalistic requests and far less quick in taking a situation and turning it around to their interests. So I think I would say you actually have a government that is leaving the field wide open to the other side.
Well, thank you very much. I'll make the one request that everyone does at this moment, which is to say there are some seats in the front. If you'd like to come here, please do so. But I know the people standing in the back never do. So anyway, you're welcome to stand there. There are seats here if you want to. I'm going to ask for some questions now, and then we'll take the other speakers, if that's all right. Does anybody want to raise any particular points from what they've heard now? Please just... Can you keep it brief and say who you are?
I'm Rebecca Payton, Kate Payton's sister, who was a journalist who was killed in 2005. And I'm just interested to ask if there are any parties, if there are any groups in whose interest it is, apart from people I would think of as, people living their day-to-day lives who would like their story of how difficult it is just to live in Somalia, if there are any groups who are interested in having any kind of balanced reporting essentially, because it seems to me that it's in everyone's interest for the story not to get out. And that doesn't strike me as just Somali nationals. There are a number of international bodies and countries who basically don't want any stories to get out of Somalia.
I don't know if I would say that. I don't know who does this. Who doesn't want the story to get out? I think the government made it very clear that they didn't want the story to get out. For example, after the looting of Bakara Market, and it's particularly the security forces in the government that have been targeting journalists. So I think they had an agenda in covering something up. I think the militant Islamists are very keen for one side of the story to get out, which is why they are so adept in posting messages on the web. I mean, I'm interested in Somalia, and I have been for a long time. I think there is a general interest in understanding Somalia more. But I think what we're getting in the reporting is, if there are news, for example, the recent taking of Kismayo, the headlines make it. You hear what happened when, but what you're not getting with the current situation is any form of context and analysis, because certainly as a foreign journalist, you are unable to spend time on the ground, and generally I just think people are scared. I mean, what I failed to say a minute ago is you do have 7 dead in 2007, 2008 figures are obviously not yet out. You have 4 wounded, but there's also been an incredible exodus of local journalists, an estimated 50, and people who are staying at home because they're too scared to report, and I think that fear is obviously very much legitimate. I don't know. I think the interest, personally, I think the interest is there. But, I mean, now I'm at Al Jazeera. We're just grappling with ways of covering the story, and I'm sure my colleagues at the BBC have the same problem. And all I can say is respect to the Somali journalists who somehow make it work and who somehow run websites probably out of their bedrooms, and even if it's just regional, contribute bits of news so that somebody somewhere can put the puzzle together.
I think one of the things I would just say as a journalist, that one of the things that's extraordinary is the way in which news does filter out. Somehow, even no matter how remote the place is, it may take a little while, but news does come out, and in some ways it's almost miraculous.
But we struggle with analysis. I mean, who at the moment understands what's happening in Kismayo?
Anyone else who wants to come in now? Yes.
My name is Peter Gett. I'm an energy journalist. I was just wondering whether you could just give us any guidance on whether the TFG has any sort of depth of support in the country, or is it entirely dependent on the presence of the Ethiopians, who are, there with American tactical support and approval. And given that the Ethiopians won't want to stay there forever, it's costing them lives, it's costing them money. What is the exit strategy for the Ethiopians, and will the TFG survive for 5 minutes if they pull out?
There's a question. Awala, would you like to come?
I think that's the challenge. The TFG, or that you're talking about, this question might be in a year ago that might be the case, that they have no supporters. But now you have Sheikh Sharif making an agreement with the TFG. Now, which TFG is it? I mean, there is a change to the situation. Again, because of the current decline or the fragmentation of the Islamists as well, there is a lot of confusion on what is going to happen next. Where are the People Alliance going to be with? There was a clear line before the Ethiopians came in. It was Islamists who were very strong, and the Clanist group who were being scared of. Even, at the time of the Union Islamic Courts, people in Puntland and in Somaliland were saying that we were going to rule by the Quran and onwards. And after that, now you have a defragmentation of the Union Islamic Courts. I think it's not what the TFG has, it is who will challenge them, even if that was the case. But to say this, I think a lot of Somalis, even in different political views, have united to fighting against Ethiopia. Again, how much of this unity will exist after the last Ethiopian troops withdraws, and what will it mean? I can only predict that it might be a worse chaos than what we saw in the 1990s. It might go back to the clan state, or we might have a chance that people to make an effective, to implement the reconciliation they signed and make it real by showing that they are going to work together, and that is the Sharif wing and the TFG wing. But it's very likely that, although a lot of people fear Eritrea, I think it's very likely if the Ethiopian troops withdraw tomorrow, I think Hassan Darwes will stick to his word and say, Sheikh Sharif, you've reached your goal and you've been successful with this, and you go in and lead with it. I think the conflict with some of the biggest leaders are very clear definitions within the Union of Islamic Courts or within the alliance opposite to the TFG, and that is the Ethiopian troops. So they might get stronger. The TFG might become, we might find a new entity that is not a TFG and that is not in the Union of Islamic Courts, but that is out of this agreement. But only God knows. I think in many times Somalis we betted that things might become better, and it didn't play out that way. But now we hope that might be the case. But as soon as Ethiopian leaves, we don't know how this. Just from my perspective, I don't know how it's going to play out.
Right. One more question, then we'll. Yes, please.
My name is Ali Ahmed, I'm Somali, live here in London. I think my question relates to the question gentleman asked. In fact, it's very difficult to see TFG having a support inside Somalia, and one of the reasons that even the Sheikh Sharif that Awale mentioned, all the groups who are fighting inside Somalia, regardless of who they support, they came together in one of the towns in Hiran regions, and they agree they will not stop the fighting until the Ethiopian leaves in Somalia. So if Ethiopian leaves, it could be two scenarios, like Awala said. Either the things will get horribly chaos and people will fight among themselves, or they will stand behind of those who have signed the agreement. But it seems at the moment the way things are, and I can't see any really hope or gloomy. It's just the picture is not so nice.
Okay. Just as a point of clarification, in case people don't know, the TFG is the Transitional Federal Government. So we have it out there. Juliana,
yeah, I mean, I think one thing that strikes me about the Ethiopians being in Somalia, what they do is they focus dissent, because there are so many people who are opposed to Ethiopian presence in Somalia that on the one hand you've got the Islamic, I mean, all the way going from the Islamic militants on one side of the scale to Somali nationalists who are not really aligned with the Islamic cause, but who are nationalists and just resent the Ethiopians being in Somalia, who are at the moment, well, or certainly have been until extremely recently, very much aligned with each other, because the common cause is to get rid of Ethiopia. And so I think a crucial point is, I mean, certainly from an international community point of view, under what conditions the withdrawal of the Ethiopians might be negotiated in order to try and help build peace in Somalia. But the other thing is, and this is where some Somalis disagree with me. Personally, I really think the Ethiopians don't want to be in Somalia, because they really are in so much deeper than they probably ever thought they would be. They came in December 2006, beginning of 2007. Mogadishu was wide open. The Islamic courts had withdrawn, and everybody was surprised at how easily the Ethiopian troops, with the TFG troops, could just take Mogadishu. A lot of people argue that it was a strategic withdrawal of the ICU from Mogadishu, and there was probably an agreement behind the scenes between the international community, the Americans and the Ethiopians, that international peacekeepers would come in and the Ethiopians could leave, and then the full-scale insurgency erupted in March, pretty much around March 2007. And suddenly the Ethiopians are in there. And personally, I think Meles Zenawi is in for so much more than he bargained for. And he would probably love to leave, because he's fighting a war that's costing a lot of lives on side of the Ethiopian soldiers. But he probably also feels cheated by the international community, was hoping for peacekeepers, but is somehow in this situation where he can't quite withdraw, but would like to.
Disagree with that. Well, now I'm going to ask Tom Quinn to say something about the humanitarian situation before going on to Khadija Ali, who joins us as we can see you on the screen. So if I can start with Tom.
Thank you. From my point of view, we'll speak on the behalf of, how we say, on the side of MSF, and we can only say what has MSF seen. There was a quote at the beginning which described the humanitarian catastrophe is not unfolding, it is happening now. This comment was made in June this year. At that time, it was made regarding 2,500 malnourished children in a camp outside Mogadishu. Currently in that camp, there's now, in our program, 4,500 children. We have seen, in the last 3 months, numbers tripling in terms of severely malnourished. We see children now coming from 100 kilometers. They're not coming severely malnourished. They're coming severely malnourished. These children are very, very sick now. Yes, it's not a reflection of the entire south and central Somalia. There are pockets that are not so bad. But yes, we are seeing, as they describe in June, a humanitarian catastrophe happening in Somalia, in south and central Somalia. I think something else to point out is the desperation of people. I mean, 2 weeks ago I was in Galgaduud. There was a child with a mother in the hospital. The mother had been there for a week. The child was completely severely malnourished. On death's door, you would not believe this child was still alive. And she was in tears. She has to go home. She has a family. She has children. She cannot stay in the hospital for another 3 or 4 weeks. And this is sort of highlighting for me and for us the coping mechanisms of people in some of these places inside south and central Somalia has reached the limit now. The cost of living, the inflation, the insecurity, basic food items are now beyond people's reach. They have sold their livestock. Their livestock have died. So, for us, we see, yes, there is a catastrophe going on in Somalia at the moment. I think one thing also that is getting very difficult is there are very few actors inside south and central Somalia to even see what is going on. The United Nations have quoted figures of 44% of the population will be needing food aid by the end of the year. That's 3.4, 3.5 million people will need food. Whether it's right or wrong, we don't know because we don't see it. But we do see the consequences of nutrition, for example. One thing that has also become quite acute for humanitarian actors in Somalia, and you've described yourself with the killing of journalists. There's been some 23 deaths of humanitarian workers in Somalia this year. There's 18 people, at least, who have been abducted. MSF itself had 3 people killed at the beginning of the year in Kismayo. We still have no idea who did this. I think for us, the concern that we have is that humanitarian action inside Somalia needs to be maintained as neutral and impartial. We cannot comment on the political process. It's not our position. Whether this political process will have a solution, we don't know. But what we do know, the humanitarian crisis is not going to get any better, and this is going to continue, whether it solves the situation or not. What I think as MSF, with our eyes and ears on the ground, shall we say, we've been in the country for 16, 17 years now with international workers. In January this year, we had almost 100 international staff in the country. We currently have 0 permanent staff in the country. We rely incredibly upon our dedicated national staff, but these staff are also getting scared. They're getting afraid. They won't move at night. They don't know who's targeting these workers. I think, for us, the major concern that we see is over the last 1.5, 2 years, since the international involvement in Somalia, we have seen the humanitarian crisis worsen. We have not seen the situation get better. For us, we ask all actors, and I believe all NGOs do the same, we are non-governmental organizations. Leave us alone. Don't bring us in the process. Our neutrality and impartiality is the only way that we can work in this country. If we are not considered as this, if we are targeted, I have I'm sorry, I have no idea what's going to happen. It's going to be worse than 93 or something. Yeah.
It's a pretty depressing picture. There is, of course, one other element, which is that the international effort to bring the grain and the food aid that is needed to keep so many people alive into Somalia, much of which is done by the World Food Programme, the United Nations, is also under attack on the high sea by the pirates that operate off the coast of Somalia. Many of the pirates, not all, but many of them driven to what they do by the fact that the seas around Somalia, because there is no government to protect it, have been vacuumed clean by ships from around the world, and many of them turn to alternative means of making a living. But I will ask, there are some colleagues from the World Food Programme here, and perhaps you can say a couple of things when we finish this section of the discussion, just about how you are now managing to get the food aid into Somalia. But can I now ask Khadija Ali, if you could say something about what you feel about the current situation and the prospects for reconciliation.
Thank you very much. I think the prospect of reconciliation, because I see that the long-term goal is the short-term goal, and Tom has explained the situation now. There's no option other than the support for the reconciliation and the Djibouti agreement. As he explained, I just came back from Mogadishu a week ago, and I have seen with my own eyes what is happening, the humanitarian catastrophe over there, the lack of reporting, as you all mentioned, and I felt that everybody is in a death, like you are in a death row. You don't know who's walking behind you, what they have. You don't know who is coming in front of you, what they will do, who's killing who, and why. Even I'm not sure whether those who are doing knows. I've never seen particular Mogadishu like this before in terms of security situation and in terms of the humanitarian crisis that are going on right now. Therefore, in terms of reconciliation, I think right now the Djibouti agreement is a good start. It's not going to resolve everything. I don't think that it will stop the violence immediately, but it all depends on many factors. And the first one is the commitment from the parties in this conflict and the international community, including the media, the mainstream media, the international media, how they report the Somali crisis. Because I'm sure there are dangers. There are Mogadishu, particularly, is a very dangerous city right now. But that was the same thing, and there were international journalists who were reporting, and there were international interests. In Somalia, it seems there are none, and I believe there are Somali nationalists, brave journalists who risk their life to report and expose and portray what's happening in Somalia on a daily basis. And I think if the international media can work with those local media people, they will be able to actually raise the awareness of the international community about the crisis in Somalia. The other thing I believe is in terms of the commitment of the TFG and the Islamic forces. As we know, there are different groups, and the oppositions are fractured. There are nationalists. The TFG have got its own problems too, and that is expected. But there's one, at least in the opposition, there's one shared grievance, which is the presence of the Ethiopian troops. Many people are against that, and I think that has to be addressed. The last Djibouti agreement was a new beginning for Somalia, a dialogue. It doesn't address very well that issue in terms of the withdrawal. The committees that has started working in Djibouti, the political committee and the security committee, have met, I believe, one time so far in Djibouti. And what does that mean for the people who live in the country? Is it that depends on whether that agreement is only between the top leaders or whether it goes down into the public and provide them their basic human needs in terms of security, in terms of food, in terms of humanitarian assistance? Is it only two committees that meet outside of the country, or those committees, if they go back into the country and start to take the agreement at all levels, whether it's the local level, at the community level, at the national level, in terms of the international community, there has to be community. There are concerns locally, there are concerns nationally, there are concerns regionally, and there are concerns internationally. Those has to be addressed, whether it's security issues or whether there are other political issues. It has to address, and this agreement should be able to address and provide a space for a dialogue that people can actually talk about. There is also important of the ownership. So far we have seen different reconciliation meetings whereby only few leaders meet and they negotiate most of the time about power sharing, who's getting what and what are we going to get and all that stuff. There has to be a different approach. I hope this time that it is the public is involved and that they have to, this agreement should create a stake for everybody that should give a hope that it is actually for everybody. I don't think that all the Somalis wants to become leaders. I think at the end of the day, those who are struggling back home, they want to be able to live peacefully. They want to have food. They want to be able to take care of their children. And they have to see it and feel it in order to trust the process and create that trust. There has to be institutions. So far, in the Somali governance, the history was always the public and the private were always the same, and everybody who goes into public office uses as a private. And I think it is the responsibility of the government to show that actually there are institutions and that they are evolving and they are coming and they can provide even the minimum service of providing security for the people. So, of course, we know that this agreement is not going to satisfy everybody. It doesn't address everybody's concerns, and it has to provide provisions for those who are still reluctant to join the peace process, that they can join anytime that they are ready, because human beings are not ready at the same time. Those who joins later, that there are provisions. What type of strategies and what are the short-term strategies that this process uses, and what are the long-term goals that they want to reach? What are the short-term strategies? Could be the security problems that is there, but also the participation, the ownership of the people. So, with all this, I believe that there is also challenges that are expected. There's a lot of mistrust between the leaders themselves and between the public. There is mistrust between the institutions, the public institutions, and there's no social contract between the institutions that exist or existed in the past and the public. And that is going to be a challenge that this process is going to face. There is also political uncertainty, as we can see. The TFG has their own problem. There are fractions in the opposition groups, and those are going to become at some time an obstacle. There are divisions in every. There are different interpretations, as we have seen the agreement. After they completed, the deputy prime minister and the speaker of the opposition made press releases. They interpreted the agreement differently because they have different constituents, and some of them are probably they were addressing to their constituents. And I hope that they can.
I'm going to stop there if I may. It is quite difficult to hear over Skype, but thank you very much for your contribution. We'll try and take you in a little bit later, but thank you for that. Let me now throw this open to the floor, and if you wouldn't mind putting your questions, and don't forget to say your name. Caroline, do you want to say something from the World Food Programme?
Yes. Thank you. I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm very recently arrived in UK as the UK representative for the United Nations World Food Programme. We have a tiny liaison office here consisting of myself and Nina beside me. I have had the benefit of working in Rome at headquarters for the World Food Programme, and there I was lucky enough to concentrate more or less on Africa and our operations there. And I'd just like to pick up on what Martin said about WFP's activities and how we get into this very difficult land to try to feed in the region of 2.4 million people. We know, as Tom said, that there are probably upwards of 3.4 million people who actually need food assistance. But right now we are struggling both from the point of view of funding, and I hate to say it, but we do need $97 million just to get us through till the end of this year. But also we're struggling because of the difficulties of delivering food in such difficult circumstances. But we are extremely grateful to the navies now of Canada, who are helping to escort our ships up the coast and are docking in Mogadishu or Merka and bringing the food in. And that is absolutely critical. And one of my main aims is to try to persuade the Royal Navy also to escort those ships, because ever since it started in November 2007, we have luckily not had any attacks. And I'm reading from my notes here, but I believe that there have been 6 incidents of shipping being attacked just in August alone off the coast of Somalia. So that gives you some indication of just how dangerous it is. And I'm proud to say that we have a ship docking tomorrow in Mogadishu, bringing in more food. And this is the only way to bring it, because as you probably know, we cannot bring it over land. It's just not safe enough. That's one of our major routes, is by sea. And bringing it also, I'm afraid to say, as far away as from South Africa, largely due to the high food prices and the fact that countries have imposed export restrictions, etc. And I think that's probably enough, but I'm happy to answer anybody's questions if there are any. Thank you.
Okay. Now some general questions. Yes, sir. If you wouldn't mind introducing.
Yeah, my name is Mohammed Yahya. I'm a Somali who lives here in London. My general feeling about the situation is I think if we focus specifically on leaders and how leaders are behaving, I think we missed the point in the Somali situation. In the last 20 years since the civil war started, we've had series of different leaders coming in and out. So it's not a personality-led war. For me, the fundamental problem in the Somali situation is one that is embedded in culture. It's a very sensitive thing for people to discuss cultural aspects and cultural behavior, especially in a nomadic societies. Especially in the last 20 years, the post-conflict environment, there is a serious fragmentation within even clans, to the level that chaos is the norm. People just don't know how to live in a peaceful situation. And whenever you have reconciliation after reconciliation, you tend to send a group of people to some city somewhere, they sign, and they just don't control those societies as much as we think they do. And when they do come back, they just lose power, they're overthrown, and the chaos continues. Or you have a cabinet full of ministers with the armies. And whenever a minister is fired by a prime minister, the war starts again. So I mean, I really can't see a way out with another reconciliation, because there's nothing to reconcile. And in many ways, what happened, for example, after Ethiopians coming to Somalia and especially Mogadishu, and the killings that happened, are very much now in many Somali clans been put on the president and his clan. So what happens is when Ethiopians withdraw, there will be bloodbath and revenge happening again. So the only way out of this quagmire is either an overwhelming international involvement, where all these people are forcibly disarmed and a trust is built on the basis of action. Otherwise, we'll be here 20 more years and talking about the same situation.
Well, thank you. It was a very strong and obviously very soothing, if pessimistic analysis. Yes.
I'd like to pick up on that, the international community. What is the international community doing? Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Mali. I'm the UK correspondent for Montreal's main daily. So basically, what is the international community doing about this? And just by the way, you mentioned at the beginning that the Americans did a strike. I mean that the U.S. armies made strikes, attacked Somalia, saying that there were Al-Qaeda supporters over there. Was that founded? Was that true?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that the Americans have been involved. I mean, that has been clearly documented on a number of occasions. 3, 4, 5, perhaps half a dozen times. There also are allegations that they have, been involved more directly, both in terms of information flows and in terms of troops on the ground. Although it's extremely difficult to get. These would be very small scale, and it's extremely difficult to get hard facts about this. Julian, do you want to talk about that, and then perhaps we can widen it about the rest of the international community, and not just the Americans. But what do you have to say?
I wasn't quite sure what your question was. I mean, I think there's no doubt that the Americans were obviously involved because they killed. Tomahawk missile strike. Who did they just kill? Iro. They killed Hassan Iro, and then they also had who was one of the Al-Shabaab leaders, so the militant wing of the Islamic courts. So he was taken out by a U.S. Tomahawk missile fired from a ship on the sea. But then there were also some attacks on the south of the country where the Americans were trying to find more Shabab leaders, which failed. So there's absolutely no doubt that the Americans are involved, and they're using long-distance technology after they had a rather unelegant exit from Mogadishu in 1993. I think, but your question was possibly, is there Al-Qaeda in Somalia or not? Yeah. I would say it appears fairly accepted that the people who were responsible for the U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998, that there are people in Somalia who were involved with that. There was a statement on a Somali on a website from Mukhtar Robo, another Al-Shabaab leader who was there with somebody. The Somalis probably here know that much better than me. Who was making the web statement together with somebody who claimed responsibility in the U.S. embassy bombings. So there seems to be, like in Somalia, and I mean the question of Al-Qaeda presence is disputed, but I would say it is very likely and probably generally accepted. The international community response is damned if you do, damned if you don't. I think the problem is in some ways the response of the international community, because there's certainly a lot of criticism about propping up the TFG government, which hasn't got universal support in Somalia. So there's a lot of criticism of supporting that. But then what are the alternatives? And you can't put the genie back into the bottle. Maybe the best thing would be if everybody just left Somalia alone. And that includes the Americans, and that includes Islamic militants. But in 2008, it's not an option.
And there is, of course, a mandate for a much larger African Union force to be there if anybody is prepared to go. The Nigerians keep saying that they're about to send troops, but they never quite seem to get there. There's just little appetite on the rest of the international community, despite the plea for a much stronger force to go in there. I mean, after the Americans, Black Hawk Down, you must know the film, had their troops dragged through the streets of Mogadishu, and that certainly is the way they see it, although I think Somalis have a rather different memory of what exactly happened on the ground. There's just no appetite for people putting boots on the ground in any large numbers. But Awali, what would you like to say about this?
I think I wanted to respond to what my colleague Yahya said here. But in regards to the international community, I think that as Somalis we realize that there is no manual for collapsed states for the international community to support. They work with what they can. Some become successful, some don't. And Somalia is in a challenging situation at the moment. Yes, within the international community there are issues. Even there are Somalis. Do we really trust the international community, or are they here just to make sure that the terror risk or element have been curbed? And does that mean when the Somalis go back to conflict within themselves, are there any more international concerns? So how the international are reflected will depend on where you are. But I think as Somalis, what we are urging now is to say that international community are there. There will be countries interested in the Somali situation. We have to find within the Somali people who have the capacity and capable enough to balance these challenges for the interests of Somalis. That, with regard to what Yahya said, that has been challenged by two groups mainly in Somalia, and that's my perspective. The clanist provisions and the Islamists. Yes, the Islamists have very well taken care of the clanist agenda, but their agenda is much bigger for the Somalis. They're not confined by the Somali borders, they're not confined by the Somali interests. So, and the clanist agenda wants to use the Somali interest to build up one clan, and that creates a problem. But the funny thing is, the Somalis who've been used to align up these two groups have not been produced by the clanists and have not been produced by the Islamists. They've been produced by Somali citizens who, they've been doctors and generals. I don't think no clan opened a school for its own people and said, become a general for our clan. What we are seeing is that the Somali citizens who have been raised to progress in this world and to become more of a nationalist rather than a clansman have been pushed to this within the civil war. And these are the lines that we have not yet managed to cross. I think with independence and with everything we've got, we've become a people who were in transition. Unfortunately, now we're seeing at this age that Somalis are stepping back from that transition. They're coming back to either clanist or other agendas. I think what we need is some sort of enlightenment, a key that pushes these Somali civil society, Somali groups, Somali academics, Somali intellectuals to bring about in the table and talk about Somali as a nation. They will never build it as you mentioned. If it continues with this pattern, what Yahya said, that pessimistic picture is the real picture that is going to emerge unless people intervene. And people like Khadija, people like the other Somalis who've educated enough and I see them as Somali citizens, have to intervene now and not expect a lot more from the international community. I think we have been handicapped by saying that the civil Somali group expecting that the world to see them, and that didn't happen. The world only deals with those with guns, and unfortunately, the one with the gun in Somalia ends up being a clansman or an Islamist who both don't carry the agenda of the Somalis, and this is my personal perspective.
I think there's just one other thing I would like to bring out here, and Juliana, perhaps wearing your previous hat from the United Nations, the monitoring group, you could just give some indication, briefly, because I know it's a huge subject, of the people who've not been, the international community that have not been trying to stop things, but have been actually trying to make things worse, and the states that have been pouring weapons into Somalia and making the conflict and really keeping the conflict going. Just give us some idea of the scale of that.
In some ways, it's a question of who isn't. And that goes back to the war within wars, because you have the clan war, the national war, the regional war, and the war on terror. And each of these wars in Somalia needs weapons or is fed by weapons from somewhere. So you have business people in Somalia who are importing weapons, and that's still, in spite of the UN embargo, which is on Somalia and prevents, at least in theory, weapon sales to Somalia isn't a huge problem. You have a lot of weapons coming in by sea, coming in from Yemen, coming in via Dubai, really relatively readily available on the international market and imported by the business community in Somalia via Puntland or via Mogadishu. That's supplying primarily the arms market in Mogadishu, but which is now also split into smaller arms markets due to fighting in Mogadishu. Then you have the regional war, where Eritrea has got a very clear agenda and is on the side of the Islamists and is backing and equipping the Islamic militants with weapons, and they're allegedly training camps in Eritrea, which is a violation of the arms embargo, which includes not just the supply of weapons, but also training. And then you have Ethiopia, and the monitoring group took the position that the Ethiopian presence in the country is a violation of the arms embargo because there shouldn't be Ethiopian soldiers. That's the view of the monitoring group, not necessarily, as some of you appreciate, the whole of the UN. But then, of course, the Ethiopians have also been supplying their allies, specific individuals, but also groups of people with weapons in Somalia. So you have the business people importing, you have a regional arms flow from Eritrea and Somalia, and then there is some evidence, allegations. Here we go back to the reporting on Somalia and what is true and what is not true. But then the war on terror is certainly feeding weapons into the conflict as well. And maybe they're one of the most dramatic escalations, really, as in Afghanistan and as in Iraq, is the use of IEDs, of improvised explosive devices, which are more bloody than any other form of warfare, and which have been killing members of the NGO community, journalists, and there's been an escalation and a transfer of IED technology into Somalia.
As you say, the list is almost endless. Yes, sir.
Hi, Jeremy Sayre, freelance journalist with a particular interest in Somalia. We've obviously been focusing on south-central Somalia, where the conflict and upheaval is, but we haven't really mentioned the north, where there's a great contrast, and it's peaceful, safe, democratic. Of the four groups of political power you talked about earlier, is there unanimity amongst them that there should not be diplomatic recognition for Somaliland, and that the union should continue from 1960 onwards?
Well, I have a view about that, and I think to say democratic is not right, because there is no democratic election in Somaliland. I cannot go to Somaliland as a Somali and say I am against the Somaliland state. The democratic is within just one point, saying that everybody should support Somalia. So those within Somaliland who are against the secessionism are not free and working in Somaliland. So they are no different to an organized militia who made the country peace, which is a peaceful city, of course. But again, the fear is, I think it's going back to what Yahya said, it's going back to defragmentation. Today we say Somaliland should have peace and it should constitute within its constituency the clans who live there. There is nothing that divides Somalis to fight against sub-clans, and it happens within the civil war. So again, if the scenario comes that Bur'a wants to become a state of its own, and Hargeisa is in war, and they both are part of Somaliland, one cannot say, oh, why should we not recognize Bur'a's land? I think what we need in Somalia is not without interfering with the Somaliland issue, and I hope secessionism or them to be acknowledged to have a referendum like any other state. The acknowledgement that they want, or the recognition that they want, is now up to all Somalis, and there are a lot of minority groups within the Somali community who are not recognized, who have been pushed away. The Somali Bantus have been imprisoned in Somaliland, have been imprisoned in Bosaso, have been punished in Mogadishu and other areas, not because they are less numbers than other communities, but they are not armed groups within there. So there are lots of issues. As a Somali, I feel that Somaliland recognition is up to the rest of Somalia, and to have a referendum like any other state in the world. I don't want to push them and say that, but it's not fair for every Somali to say that one clan has a space of peace here. Let's give them a recognition. That might lead to a breakdown of Somalia, and it might be impossible for the world to say wherever a clan comes and puts a flag up and say it's peace, we have a democratic election, give them a state of their own, might create more conflicts. We already have conflicts that Martin wrote about very clearly, that arose from Eritrea and Ethiopia borders. That is a border conflict, and that's what we have in African conflict as well. As we speak, there is a heightened conflict in Somaliland and Puntland. So I think to talk about just what works and not really explain the problems that might come out of it is telling half the truth. But I do respect Somaliland and the people who live in there. I respect their peace, and I hope it continues. But for them to have recognition is after the referendum of the rest of Somalis. That's my view.
I can just imagine the Scots agreeing to the English having a say in whether Scotland should be independent, but we won't go down that road. There's a gentleman here who's been trying to come in.
My name is Devjot Ghoshal. I study international relations at King's. At the cost of sounding terribly ignorant and maybe even politically incorrect, I would like to question the notion of of a Somali nation itself. Not only do you have sort of semi-autonomous regions as, say, Somaliland, Puntland, the Juba Valley to a certain extent, the whole Somali identity is split in between clan identities and in between a definite, clear Islamic identity. In between all this, in between all these forces pulling in various directions, does a sort of coherent, articulable Somali identity actually exist? On what basis can these people actually demand a unified Somalia if everyone's pulling in different directions? Yes, there is a sort of reconciliation movement happening, but do we really need it?
There's a fascinating question. Who's going to answer that part? Well, do you want to try?
Yes.
Is Khadija still with us? Khadija, would you like to come in here? You haven't had anything to say for a moment.
Yeah, sure. Very interesting question. Yes, we have different identities, and I'm sure everybody has. Have different identities. I'm a woman. I'm a mother. And those are identities that I have. And Somalis, of course, have identities. They have. They are Muslim, of course. They have clans, and it is not altogether bad. I think it has been misused. Whether it is the religion or whether it is the clan identity. And we probably need to renegotiate the national identity. And there are problems that was, there were problems that have existed in Somalia, and there were leaders that have used either of them to benefit for their own interests. It's not that the clan identity is bad, but it has been misused, and we really need to renegotiate and renegotiate the national identity.
This is a huge question. I'm not sure we're going to get too far if we go down. We've only got 15 minutes. I don't want to take more people.
Hello, my name is Jessie Harrington. I'm a member of the public. I just wanted to ask, how are the guns financed in Somalia? What is the return for the gun sellers in Somalia, and what are the resources of Somalia to finance all that war that's going on, please?
Well, then, never in any conflict does there ever seem to be a shortage in money to buy weapons. There is an incredibly active trade in weapons within Somalia, and a business community that exploits that and that imports to sell. Then we found on the last panel that a lot of guns are entering the system because soldiers are actually deserting. So what you have in particular Ethiopian soldiers who are tired of fighting the conflict, who are selling their weapons and deserting from the army.
But where is the money coming from to buy it?
Okay, I got to pass on that one. It appears to be there. I mean, we've got. Hang on. No, I've got some answers. I mean, we found that members of the security forces are both buying and selling, and one of the ways of generating money for the security forces is roadblocks. For example, taxing food that's coming in on NGO food supplies. So roadblocks are a huge income generator. I'd say a really significant one, certainly for the security forces who are staffing the roadblocks. That springs to mind. I'll come back with another one if I think of one, but that's the main one.
One other obvious one is the diaspora. You know,
True.
Different clans provide finances to their clans, you know, because that is, in a sense, central to their identity. So, I mean, you know, a lot of money comes from abroad.
And the other thing is there is a proxy war. I mean, Eritrea will give weapons out. They don't want money back. They want the conflict to continue. They to pressure the Ethiopians. Ethiopian used to support warlords who are aligned to them or who they support, and they don't want money back. So money is not always the cause of bringing weapons. And sometimes there was a say that in Somalia, it was harder to find a rice of ball than an ammunition of some sort. So the weapon coming in doesn't always involve trade in money. it may be people pushing interest or trying to.
But also, actually, sorry, it's been a couple of months or a few months since I worked on this. But one of the things that we found on the panel is that in the national budget, because the TFG in principle is the government is prevented from buying weapons as well unless it seeks an exemption. So what we found was evidence of the misdeclaring or reallocating of the national budget away from the way donor money had actually been given to the government and financing the security forces, which then became one block item spent on, like, let's say, the police, for example, and absolutely no breakdown where, of course, one can presume that this wasn't just for training of security forces or the evidence certainly looking at the sales of the weapons markets, and there was a clear breakdown as to who was buying, showed that it was members of the security forces.
Okay. Two more questions. I'm going to take them together, if I may, and then we'll go again.
Hi, Fabrice Conchon, I'm a member of the public as well. What would have happened if there would have been no Ethiopian intervention in December 2006? Would the safety situation have been better, or what could have happened if so?
You very much conveyed the complexity of the conflict, the layers within layers, and many different competing interests. I was wondering if you could say something about how this will impact on any sort of peace building in Somalia, the different issues that will need to be addressed. Some of the things that have come up tonight is civil society building. You were talking about the security, obviously, of Somali citizens, but also aid workers, international aid workers, and some sort of foreign press and indigenous press. I was wondering if you could perhaps mention a few of those and indicate whether you think that there are any of the parties to the conflict who have a perspective that can encompass some of these issues and are able to actually implement some of these security issues, civil society building issues.
Okay, we'll come to that. I mean, just on the Ethiopian intervention, what would have happened? The strange thing was that things were actually bedding down at that time, and the Islamic courts were actually even reaching out and made contact with the Americans, and I know were trying to get into negotiations, and these failed. I mean, both sides blame each other. I think it's the what if is always a difficult one. But do either of you want to say anything?
I think I do agree with you to some point that the Islamic force would have the monopoly of violence, and they would probably control some way or somehow. However much they evolve to, I don't know, but the control would be with them if the Ethiopians would not have interfered. But that's again, would they disintegrate as quickly as they did right now under pressure? But that time they were not under pressure. So there are many things that could be asked questions, but I think after today there would be some sort of their power that is controlling where they control, if not interfered. But there's also a risk that a lot of Somalis were pushing away in alliance with them because of the control of Qat in some areas or something like that. But if that would have turned to an all-out war against them, I don't know if the pressures would have been so. It is a big if question.
Would there be more or less anarchy?
Well, there was less anarchy, certainly, when they were in power. Although, as you point out, if you separate Somalis from Qat, from the drug, that's an extremely difficult one. Tom, let me bring you in on the question of peace building, and do you think there are elements that could be developed?
I think this is quite a complicated question for a medical NGO.
Speak without your medical hat on.
I can only speak with my medical hat. I think the complexity is for a medical NGO or an NGO working in Somalia now, we have to maintain the distance from the political process. We are not a political entity. As soon as we get involved with the peacekeeping, in Somalia, we will be clanified. We'll be placed within one quarter. And no, we treat anybody. This is what we do as an NGO. And the peace building, I don't see it as an NGO form, to be honest.
But do you think it could succeed?
I would like to think so. I'd like to see MSF walking out of Somalia with not having a need there.
All right.
Yeah?
Juliana, what do you think? Do you think there are elements within... I mean, we've had a terribly pessimistic view, frankly, tonight of the chaos of the complexity of the factionalism and the clanism. Do you think there are any elements that now can be built on?
I mean, what I'd like to do, maybe just say, I was based in Nairobi for 6 months when I was working for the UN, and I had a lot of exposure to the international community there. And I think, I mean, Awale keeps saying that Somalis have to find solutions for Somalis, and I think that is right, and that is, so I stay away from commenting on that. But certainly what I found, I saw when I was in Nairobi with some of the I don't want to name names, but some of the people who put programs in Somalia in place, I did at times feel that money was throwing at a particular project, even at a point of time when there were clearly reports coming out of Somalia that this wasn't working. And I was a bit disenchanted at times that in spite of the fact that these programs were coming out, that the people who were dealing with project administration did not rethink, reconsider, and readjust. And this is certainly not something I've heard about MSF, but other groups. And I think some of the internationals who are working with Somali programs need to be taken to task a little bit more and really need to earn their money and be in a constant dialogue with what is happening in Somalia, and really just got to pull themselves together and make it work. More accountability there, I'd say.
We are coming to the end of our time, but I would like to give Khadija and Awale the last word. Khadija, is there anything that you can see within the current situation that you can briefly tell us that you think there's a way forward?
I think there's a way forward. I think that the good government can bring some sort of negotiations in community rather than having only one. And if we can break that community, I believe that we should have good roots in the community, and that we can have some sort of security, community policing, community development, reconciliation committees at the community level that can work with the national committees that has been formed recently by the TFG and the opposition groups that have met in Djibouti. I think if we can take that to all levels of society and that people can see that they have a stake and that they can trust, I believe that that could be a bottom-up solution, and that is the hope for Somalia.
Thank you very much. Awale?
I think there is a hope for Somalia, but there are still untapped resources. Somali women, Somali educated Somali citizens, and the diaspora, although they already contribute $1 billion a year to partly the conflict and to partly save their people, but if they organize themselves a lot better than now and take the responsibility into their hands, now I think there is a lot of hope. So I don't think the picture is all gloom. From a Somali perspective, we see Somali radio, Somali TV, Somali news, all telling us what's happening, and some telling us about good reporting of what they fixed and how they fixed it. We hope that it balances out, that increases. But it's never that the Somalis are never hopeless. There is hope there. As I'm saying it, a lot of Somalis are relying on whatever cause they align themselves, either Islamist, Clanist, or whichever. All of them want a way out of what the situation that they are in at the moment. So I wouldn't say they're hopeless, but unfortunately, because we're in the Western country and what we're talking about is fragments of reporting, and reportings are always bad news, then what you're seeing is the ugly side of the picture. But there is a generally growing picture, a nice side of what's happening in Somalia, and good people coming out, as well as warlords. So you end up knowing the warlords, but we do have other great people contributed by Somalis in the international world, and probably if we use our globalization tactic that has allowed us to disperse, to bring back good from wherever we come from, then we have a good chance of not only bringing back Somalia, but making it one of the best countries. So we are hopeful.
Good. Well, I think that there's one thing that one shouldn't forget, that Somalia may be terribly divided and have had the history that it has, but it is a country which has one people, one language, which is not divided by colour, which is in general not divided by class. And although clan may be a powerful force, how many other countries in the world could you say that about? Certainly Britain and certainly many other countries that I've worked in are far more fragmented and have far more forces within them that would lead to the disintegration than Somalia does, which of course then leads us to the inevitable question then, why Somalia is as it is. And well, I hope that you've heard some elements within tonight's discussion which will give you some clues to that, and that I hope that you will attend the rest of the series that is going to be coming here over the next couple of weeks, because I certainly think this is a subject which is extraordinarily complex and extraordinarily fascinating. I would like to thank all of our speakers for their contributions and for what they've had to say here tonight, which I think have really given us some thought and some depth on this subject. Thank you very much.